Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Lagarflot. In the year 1345, a mystery began in the lake town of Egilsstadir in Iceland. Locals witnessed a monster in the waters of Lake Lagarflot. They described this monster as a gigantic sea serpent, and it became known as the Lagarflot serpent. It was recorded in medieval scripts in 1589 that the monster was said to have raised its body so high above the water that a ship could have passed underneath. It appeared once again in the 17th century in Icelandic chronicles. The monster was witnessed between 1749 and 1750, discussed in the media in the 20th and 21st century, and even recorded on video in 2012. The mysterious lake worm has been witnessed repeatedly for about 700 years. People have described it as a gigantic worm slithering through the lake. Some have called it a gigantic water slug, and nobody has any idea what in the world it actually is. We know that the lake itself is fed by glacial waters. It's a massive body of water that's below sea level, and the worm is supposedly about 40 feet long. It's even been seen outside the water, coiled like a serpent in the shade of some trees. This thing is basically the Loch Ness Monster of Iceland, and with just as many sightings. In 1963, the head of the Icelandic National Forest Service claimed to see the beast, and it was witnessed again in 1998 by a teacher and her entire class of students. In 1983, contractors laying a telephone cable found that their equipment had been broken by an unidentified creature, and some claim it was the giant serpent. Number 9. Lost Underwater City. Divers came across a group of circular columns and what appeared to be paved flooring off the shores of the Greek island Zakynthos. They believed at the time, in 2016, that they had come across a lost underwater city, a kind of Atlantis situation just off the coast of Greece. The columns looked like they had been shaped by human hands, and the floors were so flat and smooth they looked like the floors of temples or some other ancient buildings. This became an instant mystery and an international sensation. Nobody had any idea what this lost city was, who may have built it, or how old it was. Sadly, the mystery came to a grinding halt when scientists from the University of East Anglia came up with their own solution. According to Professor Julian Andrews, this was no lost city at all, but a geological phenomenon. Instead of archaeological remains such as pottery, the divers had simply come across structures made of hard minerals. These are called concretions, the result of faults underneath the surface releasing gases from deep within the earth. When the gases are released, they cause a change in chemistry of the sea sediment, and it creates a kind of natural cement structure. Even though the circular structures may look like the columns of a sunken temple, they are really just fancy rocks. Number 8. The Octavius. The Octavius set sail from England in 1761 on its way to the Far East. This was a long and hard journey to make, and not many captains could steer their ships all the way around the world to India. And so, the captain of the Octavius wanted to prove his skill and decided he would try the Northwest Passage on the return trip home. Unfortunately for everyone on board, they were never seen alive again. The ship became stuck in the ice north of Alaska for 13 years. It was discovered on October 11, 1775 by a whaling ship called the Herald. It was found floating west of Greenland, and the entire crew of 28 was frozen and dead below deck, perfectly preserved like human icicles. Unfortunately, we don't actually know if any of this is true. The story of Octavius is a marine legend. The captain's body was supposedly discovered at the table in his cabin, with his pen frozen in his hand. He had frozen to death still trying to write in his captain's log. The last entry was from November of 1762, which indicated the ship had been frozen for 13 years. There aren't any legitimate historical records of the ship ever existing aside from the anecdotes and legends. After the whaling ship departed, the Octavius was never seen again. Some say it's still floating across the seas to this very day as a spooky ghost ship. Number 7. Corpse ships in Japan. In 2015, Japan was having trouble with ghost ships washing up on its shores. Over a span of 2 months, 12 wooden boats were discovered adrift off the coast of Japan, carrying with them a disturbing cargo. Between the 12 wooden boats, Japanese authorities discovered the bodies of at least 22 people. These bodies weren't freshly dead either. but were already partially skeletonized. 2 of the bodies didn't have their heads. One boat contained 6 skulls for some reason, and all the corpses were vigorously decomposed. They appeared to have been dead and adrift at sea for a very long time, and it wasn't immediately clear where in the world they had come from. The Coast Guard in Japan immediately launched an investigation trying to unravel the mystery of the ghost boats. And while they weren't able to verify 100% where they had started their journey, they did make some educated guesses. The Japanese authorities believed that the boats came from North Korea and that they were carrying desperate North Korean defectors trying to flee the country. Sadly, this became less of a ghoulish mystery and more of a tale of tragedy. One of the boats had scraps of cloth that looked like a North Korean flag, which helped put the pieces together. It appears that the people in the boats fled North Korea by sea, only to get lost in the open ocean with no food or water. The people all perished inside the boats, and their skin literally fell off their bones. Later, their bones were bleached by the sun, before the tide finally brought them to the Japanese coast. Number 6. The USS Maine. On the night of February 15, 1898, the U.S. battleship Maine was secured off the coast of Cuba. It exploded for an unknown reason that very night, filling the dark sky with fire and tossing dead and wounded sailors like ragdolls into the waters of Havana Harbor. The explosion caused a political catastrophe between the United States and Spain, since they had already been disputing Cuba as the island nation struggled for independence. Shortly after the explosion, the Spanish-American War began. But that's another story altogether. What we want to know is what sank the USS Maine. Over 100 years later, we still don't know. Some experts say it was an underwater mine, some say an accident on board, and some even say a primitive torpedo. There is even a crazy conspiracy theory that says newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst sabotaged the ship. His goal was to force Spain and America to go to war, and that way he could sell more newspapers. The reality is there is no way to solve the mystery all these years later, and we'll probably never know. The history books claim it was Spain's fault, that they had torn a hole in the bottom of the ship on purpose. But according to a study in 1976, the damage was self-inflicted. The study claimed it was a coal fire in the belly of the ship that ignited stacks of gunpowder, an accident that started a war. We may never know for sure exactly what happened to the USS Maine, since the only contributing evidence we have today is the previous studies and 100-year-old photographs. Number 5. The Legendary Kraken. In 2014, Captain John Bennett's crew dragged an unbelievable creature into their fishing boat. They had been fishing in the remote Ross Sea of Antarctica, and nobody had been expecting to reel in a literal monster. And yet, that was exactly what they found. They hauled a squid into the boat that weighed over 770 pounds, a biblical sea monster which was captured from over 1 mile below the surface. The marine monster was actually a colossal squid, which was about the length of a small bus. The fishermen brought the specimen to shore, handed it over to scientists, and they kept it frozen for 8 months while doing studies. One of the squid scientists involved, Kat Bolstad, said it was an unprecedented opportunity to examine a colossal squid. After all, scientists don't know that much about these aquatic animals. Colossal squid are so big and live so deep in the ocean, it's extremely rare that they are captured in fishermen's nets. But the real mystery is trying to figure out if it's the same colossal squid responsible for the ancient myths of the legendary Kraken. As you may know already, the Kraken first appeared in written history in the 13th century in Icelandic lore, but stories of the tentacled beast can be found much earlier and from all over the world. Scientists wonder if it was the colossal squid that gave birth to these legends, or if there was an even bigger squid that has since gone extinct. A squid so gargantuan, it really could have brought down entire fleets of ships. Number 4. The Road to Atlantis. Scientists in the Pacific Ocean have just discovered the road to Atlantis. Oceanographers doing scientific experiments aboard the EV Nautilus were looking at the floor of the ocean off the coast of Hawaii when they made the discovery in April of 2022. The particular area they were observing happens to be within a massive underwater volcanic mountain range. At a depth of 3,376 feet, Near the top of the Nootka Seamount lies the mysterious road. Scientists could not believe their eyes. Even more amazing is that the discovery was made while the team of scientists was broadcasting their 24/7 live stream on YouTube. Everyone who was watching got to see the strangely uniform road of yellow stones come into view. But is this really the road to Atlantis? Or a road to some other ancient submerged city? That's a question that's hard to answer. Scientists say that only about 3% of this particular volcanic range underwater has been explored. This means there could technically be ruins somewhere. Its peaks rise to over 16,000 feet above the seabed, with the tallest summit a mere 200 feet beneath the surface. It's not that outrageous to think the sea level rose thousands of years ago, covering a city that had previously been on an island. However, the scientists were quick to point out that the road, even though it appears to be paved in yellow bricks, is almost certainly a geological formation. It looks like a road, and there is no way at the moment to prove it isn't, but the scientists doubt that it leads to a lost city. Number 3. Crumbling Shipwreck. Archaeologists discovered a mysterious shipwreck in 2013, buried at the bottom of a stream. But only recently did the researchers begin the long and arduous process of taking the boat apart piece by piece to solve its mystery. The issue is that the shipwreck is old, 1,300 years old to be exact. Its timbers are so fragile that the air itself will destroy them if they aren't sprayed with water every 30 minutes. The boat is currently under the protection of the French National Institute for Preventive Archaeological Research. They say the boat has been carbon dated to around 680 AD, to the Middle Ages. It was originally 40 feet long, and it could have been used to navigate large rivers and shallow coastal waters along France and the Atlantic. The mystery scientists are still trying to figure out who built the boat and what it had been used for. We don't know if it was built by the tribal people of the Franks while they were dominating much of Western Europe after the Roman Empire had fallen, but it does date back to around that time. It may have even just been an ordinary fishing boat. We just will never know for certain. Number 2. The SS Waratah. Speaking of mysterious boats, let's check out the disappearance of the SS Waratah. This was a passenger and cargo steamship built back in 1908. Its purpose was to travel between Europe and Australia, bringing passengers and cargo across the open seas. But in July of 1909, this ship's second voyage, she vanished while somewhere off the coast of South Africa. She was between Durban and Cape Town when she simply evaporated into thin air, with 211 passengers, full of manned crew aboard. Over 100 years later, the mystery has never been solved, and the SS Waratah has never been found. Although it's still a mystery, there are definitely theories. Some say the ship was hit by a freak wave that sucked it into the ocean. Others say that because the Waratah was carrying a massive load of around 1,000 tons of lead and 300 tons of lead ore concentrate, the cargo destabilized the ship and it capsized. Another theory states that the Waratah was caught in a monstrous whirlpool. Fierce winds, raging ocean currents, and a deep ocean trench created a swirling drain of water to suck the ocean liner down into its dark and murky depths. Number 1. Creepy fossilized brain. Scientists have discovered the mysterious fossil of a marine creature that lived over 500 million years ago. More specifically, they found the perfectly fossilized brain of this creature, a primitive form of prawn that had 3 eyes. Scientists say that thanks to its preserved brain and its complete central nervous system still visible in the fossil, they can now learn more about the origins of the creepiest things in the world, like insects and crustaceans. The creature's scientific name is Stanleycaris hirpex, and it had 2 dangling eyes on stalks with 1 gigantic eye in the middle. It also had spiked claws and lived during the Cambrian period, which was when life exploded in a serious way on the planet for the first time. Even though it was only a prawn, it was the apex predator of its time. The fossil was found in the Canadian Rocky Mountains, in a prehistoric graveyard called Burgess Shale. University of Toronto scientist Joseph Moisiuk says he and his team have been able to look at the visual processing centers of the creature's eyes and even see the traces of nerves going into its appendages. It truly was a disturbing life form, and yet it's only one example of what the oceans looked like approximately 506 million years ago. It was a primordial soup of insectoid-like monsters just like this one, all birthed from some cosmic nightmare. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!